People believe science can do a lot without understanding anything about science themselves. So in a sense, it has to be a belief system. Too much of sociology thinks that meaning has been eliminated from modernity. Max Weber talked about rationalization, bureaucracy, science, disenchantment. A lot of people who are religiously faithful think that there's no meaning because religion doesn't organize the society as much. Or Marxists think capitalism has destroyed meaning in the modern world. I would argue, though, that there's much less break between a traditional society and a modern society than these kinds of theorists believe.
Today, I invited sociologist and endowed professor Jeffrey Alexander to talk about cultural sociology, in which he is a leading figure in.
Cultural sociology puts meanings at the center. Art often puts individual meanings at the center, but it's possible to see that meanings are social, that they are collective and shared, some by the whole nation or the whole world even, but also shared by individual groups. And that, for example, families, friendship groups, universities, cohorts, generations, ideological groups, social movements. And it's the sharing of these meanings that makes life understandable, gives us our motivations to act. And that also influences others because we project these meanings to others who we could call audiences. Meanings also create solidarity with people who share the same symbols, who share the same totems, the same symbolic material goods. They feel connected to one another. So modern societies are very different, of course. One way they are not different is that meaning still matters.
So in modernity, people have the tendency to idolize rationality, or people think science or rationality can explain everything.
That's certainly true. I mean, you could look at science as a symbolic belief that people have looked to as traditional people look to God. People believe science can do a lot without understanding anything about science themselves. So in a sense, it has to be a belief system. For anything to really work, there has to be a meaning attached to it. If you don't have that, then you have to use force to mobilize society so that, and you'll see that even the institutions that do have force, like let's say the military or a dictatorship, they still work very, very hard at creating legitimacy through symbolic meanings in a way. They engage in practical cultural sociology because they know that using force is a very inefficient way to try to mobilize people. Just as an individual life needs a sense of past, present, and future, we all need stories. We all have identities.
So what are some examples nowadays about meaning mobilizing people or narratives mobilizing people?
Emancipation, for example, feminism. I mean, we could think of feminism as simply good sense or enlightenment or even rationality. We could think of feminism as a product of a powerful series of social movements over 150 years. But feminism is also a belief system about equality being extended to women. It's a new way that society developed to think of women as powerful. Didn't Mao say that women carry half the world? So I think feminism creates heroes like heroic women, strong women, athletes, scientists, and it's a very idealistic movement. One of the interesting things about meanings are they're binary. They're composed of sacred beliefs and their opposite, profane and polluted beliefs. In a sense, you need both the good and the bad there all the time, the yin and the yang. So that's a kind of tragedy of goodness that it's always combined with its opposite. So the civil rights movement puts multiculturalism as something sacred and racism as something evil. And you need both of those things. The symbolism of evil gives you something to fight against. The symbolism of good, something to fight for and be united around. For example, President Trump, he's a very calculating and strategic political leader who you could say represented the upper class or a capitalist class. But at the same time, he was a tremendous cultural figure. He was a symbol. He had, instead of just using Max Weber's notion of charisma, I think a deeper way is in a cultural sociological way, thinking that Trump had an exquisite performative ability to make himself into a character in a story, a righteous fighter on behalf of the people against the elites, which is what populists always do. He was going to overturn liberalism and the Enlightenment, and his ability to mobilize and provide new meanings for people is very important. The society as a whole isn't organized by rationality, but much more by values, by meanings, and by passions, as you suggest. Passions that are passions of love and passions of hate. And those flow through institutions and societies. If we didn't see this, if we just thought that modernity was disenchantment, then we wouldn't understand the last century, which was a very tumultuous period of human history.
So in cultural sociology, we emphasize the approach to combine the aesthetics and the meaning, which is also the surface and the depth. Why do you think both aesthetics and meaning are important?
Aesthetics is a way of explaining how material objects connect with the senses, sight, touch, smell, taste, hearing, and that these senses are affected by the form, the aesthetic form of surfaces. I think we need to understand the cultural turn was initiated because of language, of the linguistic turn of Wittgenstein and the role of Ferdinand Saussure and semiotics. So the analogy that's used is how we read nature, how we read society, and the role of discourse, the discursive construction of X, Y, and Z. That's very important, and we can use the tools of literature in the literary theory to apply them to society as we understand the discursive construction of society. But we need to bring to that an appreciation of materiality, not as a brute material force, but as something that becomes powerful through its aesthetic or iconic impact.
I think I have one last question regarding your feeling about the field of sociology moving toward a more quantitative direction, or the big data using to explain a lot of things.
Human society isn't like nature, that human beings are not driven by forces like gravity or magnetism, but that they're driven by meanings and feelings and ideas. And also that individuals have freedom to change their directions because of the influence of meanings.
So I guess that's all the content of today's video. Thank you, Jeff, very much for joining me.
Thank you, Dorothy.